Sean Charles.
You gotta stay in the driver's seat of your life. You gotta command your life. You gonna have to grab that steering wheel. Using God as your GPS. You gonna have to grab that steering wheel and take control of what you're doing. Take responsibility for your actions. Hold yourself accountable. Give permission to the people around you to hold you accountable. God loves us all. God loves us so much. He will send people around us to bless us and show us how much He loves us, help guide us, help feed us. We gotta learn how to receive that love. We gotta stay healthy enough to receive that love, feed our good wolf, and know how to give it back. Know how to stay in community. God loves us. God loves us. J. Floyd speaks life.
Yes. Yeah, I like the way my voice is sounding. Listen, everybody, I'm traveling right now. I am mobile, but luckily the person that I'm interviewing today is an audio savant. So he was able to come through in the clutch for me and help me get my mobile setup going on. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of J. Floyd Speaks Life, the podcast. As you know what we do, man, sometimes we bring some really great people on here and we sit down with them for a while and we get their life story, man. And right now I have with me Myron Davis, man, Minister Myron Davis, who is for one, I consider him a spiritual big brother, right? I don't know if you know that, man, but
No, man. It's cool.
And I got some little snippets of stories that I'm going to tell as we go on.
Cool.
But I just want to bring you in, Myron. How you doing today, man?
Man, thanks for having me, man. I've been wanting to be on here. I've been seeing the podcast and really looking forward to chatting with you, man. I love what you do. Your books, your poetry, your acting, man. I'm all there for it, man.
We're gonna talk about that acting part because,
Good stuff.
Dude, that's because of you.
Man. Oh, man, that's what's up.
You
man.
did that.
Good stuff, man.
So let's just get into it, man. Let's roll, man, because there's no time limit on this.
Cool.
I want you to just feel comfortable to just tell us who you are. I'm gonna kind of lead you with some questions, man. Number one, and I know the answer to this, but actually, I think I know the answer to this. So I want to make sure I start with it. So where'd you grow up, man? Where are you from?
Yeah, man, I grew up in Cleveland Heights.
I figured that.
I lived right on Clarence Road.
Your whole life, born and raised.
Born and raised. Went to Heights High. I went to a Christian school for the early years, but 7th grade, went into Cleveland Public, graduated from Cleveland Heights High in 92.
Heights High?
That's it, man.
Yeah.
And so I've been there. I've been a Cleveland kid. Went off to college for a little while, traveled a little bit, came back home.
So tell me about this. You're growing up here in Cleveland Heights.
Yeah.
Unique environment, right? We're talking about the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
It was unique.
Oh, absolutely.
I try
Very
to tell
diverse.
people all the
It was
time.
beautiful, man.
It was
was
hard to
beautiful.
describe.
I actually heard that there was a book written or some kind of study that was written for that time from like 74 to into the early 80s where they were talking about the diversity, kind of like an experiment. But it was a very diverse time, man. I don't remember ever feeling any racism or exclusion.
It was serious,
I went to
man.
school with people who looked like me and looked like other people. It was just so diverse, man. And so that's how I grew up.
Yeah.
That's how I knew how to live. There were Indian people, Chinese people. It was just a whole gamut.
Yeah.
We were all there together, so it was great.
It was my first exposure when we moved to Cleveland Heights to Orthodox Jewish people.
Yeah, that's right. That's
I
right.
remember coming to school like, hey, what'd you get for Christmas?
Yeah, we
and
don't
they're like,
celebrate, right?
nah, bro.
That's right, man. That was it. It was beautiful, man.
It was.
I think that's a great way to bring kids up, to have an appreciation for all lives, for all people.
Yeah. So tell me about your parents, man. Did you have both parents in the home?
Yeah, I had a mother and father were there when I was young. My father was a preacher. He was a I call him a down home preacher, though. Our church was very small, the church he had. And he would do a lot of street preaching. He'd just go up to people and share the gospel with them. He was very outspoken, very loud.
So he was grassroots, like right at you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, right on 105 and I want to say it was St. Clair, one of our churches. And we would do street meetings, tent meetings. He'd have a van. He'd pick up families and bring them in. It'd be like maybe 6 families at the time, max. But he preached, played saxophone. My mother played organ. And as soon as my brother and I got old enough, we picked up some of the instruments and began to play in church, in my dad's church.
So you mentioned your brother, right? And I know I came up in Heights right after y'all. Y'all was still there when I got there, right? And your brother Aaron, Niles, right?
Yes, right.
How? Any other siblings?
Yes, I've got 3 older sisters.
Really?
Let me see, how many of them went to Heights? One of them went to Heights, and then one graduated from a Christian school. The other one was considerably older, so I don't even know what school she went to. But yeah, 3 older sisters, man. The music hit the last 3 of us. So my youngest sister, 7 years older than me, she's a PhD in music right now in Chicago.
Wow.
Dr. Janae Jenkins.
So wait a minute. When you said the music hit y'all, that's more than a hit, man.
Yeah, that hit us, man.
It got y'all strong.
But it had to. Both parents were musicians.
Yeah.
It had to. That was what we grew up doing. My sister was a flautist, all through middle school, Heights, band and everything. Went on to graduate, Wheaton College.
You know it's serious when he pronounces it correctly.
Yeah, that's right. It's serious, man. Yeah, but my brother plays every instrument, bass guitar, drums, saxophone, sings.
Yeah.
And then I got some of that too, so.
Wow. So what was it like, what was that environment like, y'all growing up with not only the music, but you growing up in the word?
Yeah.
And the hardcore word. Like, your father's bringing it on the street.
Yeah. And not only that, I went to a conservative Christian school coming up, so that was our life. My mother and father did their best. It was mainly my mother at this point, did her best to keep us in a sheltered environment.
Yeah.
My father probably left our house when I was maybe 10. I can never quite remember the age, but about 10. So before I was able to really start asking those men questions, it was right at that age where it would have been pivotal. He left the home, and so my mother did her best to keep us in an environment where we'd be protected from getting that influence from the street.
Yeah.
There were gangs right on our street. It was Vice Lords, some other stuff. I can't even remember all of them, but they were right there at the edge of the street. So
I try to tell people that, and people always look at me like, man, Cleveland Heights ain't, no, Cleveland Heights had gangs,
we had
man.
gangs, man. and just, even not always gangs, but just guys who didn't have any direction.
Yeah.
Guys who hung out in the streets, who got into stuff that had my brother and I got into, it'd be different stories for us.
Yeah. So what was the dynamic like between you and your brother? Because, you're talking about the 2 male siblings. You said you had 3 older sisters.
Yeah.
How did that break down?
Yeah, so my brother and I were kind of raised like twins. We were a year and a half apart. When we were kids, my mother dressed us alike. I don't know if it was as much just styling thing or it's just my mother wasn't really into fashion. She just picked up 2 of the same outfit.
Just grabbed 2 of them.
But yeah, she raised us as twins, and we did everything together. So when one of us had a birthday, the other one would get presents, When it came to music, we were both in music classes. When it came to theater, we were both there. So we were really close. Of course, we were different personality types, so we had our moments.
Yeah.
I was the big brother for sure. And so he'll give you stories about that, but yeah, man, we were raised like twins. We had music groups together, and it's been like that.
Wow, you said y'all had music groups together. I gotta tell a quick story, man, of the first time I saw you and your brother. Right, the first time I noticed who y'all were, I was a freshman at Heights, right, and y'all were like it for music, right?
Wow.
Like you could feel it. Yeah. You could see it, and me and all of my friends, we came up in hip hop.
Okay.
That was it exclusively,
that's right.
right? Like that was all the music we cared about. We were not well-rounded at all. And it's like to see people who could play instruments and sing and hold notes and really knew it was kind of amazing.
Oh, that's what's up, man.
Right?
Yeah.
So when we saw y'all were essentially like Boys to Men to us.
Okay, got it.
And I remember thinking like, man, I just want to get on stage with them dudes, because as a rapper back then, you needed somebody who could get you on the stage.
Yeah. Oh, that's why.
Rap wasn't big enough to get on the stage.
Right.
But if you could get somebody talented as y'all, I was like, they could get us on the stage. Right.
I feel you.
So it's always kind of it's kind of cyclical, and it really means a lot for me after I got my life together and came to the Lord.
Yeah.
To for you to be there.
Oh man, that's what's up.
You know,
That's what's up.
for you to be there, it was really familiar.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
and
cool,
it
man.
was a good grounding.
Oh
you know?
man, that's great, man. That's exciting to hear, man. This what's so funny is, I think my brother was always he always had ambition to be a star. He had seen, he kind of seen his path a little earlier. It's funny. My mother used to tell us this verse all the time. It's Proverbs. I think it's Proverbs 18:16, and she would always say, "A man's gift makes room for him.
Yeah.
Brings him before kings." And she would tell us that all the time. But I think early on, I must have been about 4 years old, and there was an old prophetess woman, like a woman who spoke vision of the future. She told my mother, she shook our hands, and she told my mother, "I see this boy on stage, like in front of a large crowd, singing like Stevie Wonder." And my mother just always carried that.
Wow.
I didn't know, but from that moment, she just began bringing instruments into the house. So my brother and I always had instruments. My father would bring keyboards in, and we always had musical stuff around. We didn't do that great as far as education goes. As far as school, I'd say, math really kicked my butt. And there was some times where I wasn't sure if my brother was going to graduate. It was real, but the music stuff, we were always just ready.
It came natural to you?
That was how she kept us in the house. That was how she protected us. She had this vision. And so she said, "Look, I'm gonna make sure that these guys have every advantage that I can give them to live out." She believed in that prophecy that the older woman spoke to my mother.
That's amazing,
And
man.
so she supported us, man. She drove us around. She always bought a van or a minivan or a station wagon because I had drums. Drums was my first instrument.
Yeah.
When I was 6 years old, I got my first drum set, and it was just interesting, man. Fast forward 20 years, and I was on stage of about 5,000 people. Stevie Wonder being one of my biggest influences.
Yeah.
And so, my mother got to see that come to fruition.
That's amazing. You mentioned having a drum set at 6.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got a 6-year-old. You know what I mean? 6, man.
Yeah.
6.
Yeah. Well, the beautiful thing, though, is I had a real outlet because my father had a church.
Yeah.
The audience was small, so he could afford to put his son
But
out
did it
there.
come natural? Like when you picked it up, was it like, I feel this? Or did you have to go to lessons and learn?
No, the drums was natural.
Yeah.
I don't remember how I was playing back then, but I don't think it mattered as much to start because it was like, look, this is what we're doing. My mother was on the organ and I was banging. My brother started on bongos and then he got a guitar and he moved the guitar and it was like, oh, okay, we're doing this now, bass and guitar. We got a band.
I think, and I have some theories on this, but I think there's some power in learning something without the fear of doing it wrong, right? To just pour all your passion in it.
Yeah.
And let that be how you fully learn it. Because I think a lot of things, even learning in school, we really only halfway learn it because we're so scared to do it wrong.
Yeah, you're right, sure.
We don't really passionately learn it. We just, okay, that's what they said it is. That's what it is.
Yeah. And I would add to that I think it comes differently for certain people. Some people have it naturally.
Yes.
They get it honest, so to speak. They grow up and around it, and so they just come out doing it. Babies who never had a lesson, don't speak language yet, but they've got rhythm. Some people get it naturally. Some people have to work for it. Some people, the structure is helpful.
Yeah.
It wasn't that way for me. I had to get it honest, man. I had to get it straight from my parents. I did take some lessons after a while, but the majority of what I do is just a gift.
Even now, you just, wow. That's amazing, man. So tell me about, you talked about school academically.
Yeah.
So you growing up, you get into music, man. Your parents were from the church. You got exposed to the word in a strong way early.
Yeah.
You go to Christian school.
Yeah.
What is Myron like in middle school? Like, how does that happen?
So again, we were pretty sheltered. So from first grade through sixth grade, I was at a Christian school, and it was fairly diverse. It wasn't not as diverse as Cleveland Heights, but it was still a school in Cleveland Heights. So it was a small microcosm of that.
Yeah.
Very mixed group. And I was a musician there too. A lot of the people who I went to school with also went to church with. So they knew me from different worlds. And at church, at this time, I was going to my uncle's church, Good Shepherd in East Cleveland. And I was a drummer there. That was a place where I'd been singing. Some people knew, hey, he sings. And then I got into the theater, probably fourth grade. And my music teacher heard me singing, and she said, "Oh man, there's something. You got a little soul." So she would put me on, and I got my first acting performance. I think I was in 4th grade, and I played a Jewish kid. The play call for Jewish kids. I had to wear a yarmulke. It was so interesting. But that was how I got my start. I still remember it to this day.
That's some diverse casting, man.
Yeah, for real, man.
That's pretty good.
But yeah, so I was sheltered, man. I was kind of a nerdy kid. Just I knew music, and so that was kind of how it was. I also spoke differently than most of the people around me, so they used to tease me about that.
Really?
I was too proper. I didn't. It was just all of that kind of stuff you
Yeah.
get. But yeah, that was it, man. So. That was middle school. And once I got into Heights, it really became more apparent that I was a little on the odd side, you know, because of being in the arts. So I had to kind of find the circle. But what was beautiful, man, the arts were so big at Cleveland Heights, man.
I was just about to say that.
It was amazing. So we found it
slanted towards that.
Oh man, I don't know what it's like now, but I know the band room was a community all of its own, man.
It really was, man.
It was a beautiful thing. I made some lifelong friends there too. So yeah, that was high school. The other thing too was there were some people who were, like you said, they were destined to be artists. So they were artists back then. I don't think I was an artist back then. I was just a musician. I was a kid who could sing. I was a kid who could play drums. So I did make jazz band. I was one of the lead drummers in jazz band in my later years. But I wasn't thinking I'm going to go out here and be an artist.
Yeah.
That just wasn't my thought. I was happy playing at my church. I make music. I still make music in my basement. I don't put it out. People come over.
You're just doing it.
I was like, hey, come and check out some tracks I've done. and that's even how I got signed. It was so funny. I met a guy through Buddy Banks from the Rude Boys. I think I was at the time working at a video store or something. And he said, hey, man, come to my crib. I got a little studio there. Well, let's write some songs. I was like, cool. And met a guy. We wrote some songs together. And again, I wasn't thinking of doing it as an artist. Yeah. I just love making music. He sent the songs out. All of a sudden, I get a call to come up to New York to do a song that I've written. And that began my journey into the national recording aspect. And
we got to talk about that, man, because I think that's a real key thing, man. But just to dovetail into that, I want back, we're talking about Heights. Yeah. You in that band room. Yeah. You in that musical family. Yeah. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And it was a family.
It was a family, man.
It was serious
incredible.
Business. Yeah. I remember being so jealous. Like, man, look at all of those talented people in there.
Man,
you could just hear it. Like, it's like laughs and jokes and love. Yeah. It was tremendous, man. But, you're in that, and you're in church. Yeah. You're doing music there. Yeah. You're getting on the stage there. Yeah. We're talking about Good Shepherd, right? So I just want to tell a quick story, right? I always talk to my audience about the things I've been through. They know my brother was murdered in 1992, right? I was going into 11th grade. I came back into 11th grade. My mom didn't really know how to get me back into real life. Okay. So she was like, hey, go to church with your friends. So my one of my best friends, Brandon Jerome Melton, him and Walter Melton.
Oh, yeah.
They were like, hey, crazy. You know what, Miss Floyd? We'll come pick Jay up every week and take him to Good Shepherd.
Oh, that's crazy.
And I was like, cool, let's go. And every week they were like, you know what? There's this dude there, Myron Davis, man. They got a singing group. That's there crazy. It is. They're so great. Yeah, and we saw y'all, and I was like, oh man.
Yeah, Walt was in my singing group, man.
Yes.
Yeah, Walt was
and he told me, and we were like, what do we got to do? Can we write some rap? What can we do? Yeah. And they were like, what the key is, we're going to church, right? We got to learn the word. Yeah. And I'm like, at this time, I'm like, the word? Yeah, what? Yeah, I'm going because I want to just, there was some nice girls there.
Right, that's right. I'm
like, I want to keep going back. Because the women, right?
Right.
I say women, they were girls. I was like 17, right? So it's like I'm chasing these girls, going to this church, and every time I go, I see you. Yeah. You're up there. Yeah. You're what they're talking about. You are speaking the word. I'm thinking it's going in one ear and out the other, right? But it's planting seeds.
Yeah. Oh, man.
So when we fast forward almost 20 years later, when I come into New Community, again, we're talking about the familiarity. Yeah. To see Minister Myron Davis, I was like, okay, I'm at home.
Oh, man, that's good stuff, man. That's good stuff, man. Yeah.
So, I mean, I just want to tell you, you have been a symbol of a rock
Oh man, that's good.
for me in my life and bringing me back to where I need to be in the community, in the word, you know, even when I didn't want to hear it years ago, you know.
Oh,
and also your mom too.
Yeah, that's right.
Because when I finally came to join, she was right
She
there.
was there. Yeah, she was there. That's right. That's right.
She was right
That's
there.
right.
And she remembered me.
Yeah, okay, good stuff.
And we talked, I mean, oh man, so I just, listen, I owe a debt of gratitude to the Davis family, man. I couldn't wait to get you on the show so I could tell you all
man,
of that.
that's what's up, man. That's serious, man. Oh, wow.
But yeah,
Praise God,
back
man.
to high school, man. That's
what's
where,
up, man.
and I remember as we were, you know, started the journey on into college, and then I got word they were like, hey, Myron got signed.
Yeah.
And I was like, what?
That's right.
And we went out and we bought the tape.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, look at, and now correct me if I'm wrong, man. Didn't you sing like a little drummer boy rendition at one point?
Yeah, that's right, with Island Records' Christmas album.
Why is that so hard to find? Like I was looking.
Yeah, it's online. It is online, but the record label changed over. They merged with Def Jam, so it's become one of those rare gems.
That must be what it is.
But
But I want to tell the audience I found it.
Okay, good stuff.
It's on Pandora.
It's on Pandora.
It's on Pandora.
Good stuff.
Yes.
I think I bought it on iTunes.
Yeah.
I think I bought it, but that's good. It's good to know, man.
So tell me about this, man. So we're talking about after high school.
Yeah.
You end up in the actual music business.
Yeah. And again, man, I'm telling you, so I go back to that verse that my mother used to quote to us, Proverbs 18:16, that the gift will make room for you, is I have always been just a true music head, not an artist. Like I even to this day, like I don't think like, man, I got to let people know who I am, where I'm at, you know, hey, put me on the program. I've always just been discovered every single stage of it, just wanting to do the art, wanting to be pure with it, wanting to do my best. And I just kind of put it out there, and people would grab and say, hey, I'm going to put this out. So long story short, I went to, when my father died when I was first year of college, I was going to school at Wright State. I was going to be a computer engineer. I don't know why. It sounded really cool. I thought I was future-proofing myself. But I was so bad in math, man. I flunked out pretty much that first semester and just ended up kind of living on campus. But my father died that first, pretty much first or second semester there. So I kind of made a vow that I was going to pursue music. That's what my father wanted me to do. So 1993, I went up to Berklee College of Music. I had gotten a scholarship earlier from jazz camp. And so I asked my mother, I said, I want to transfer. I want to go to Boston. Went there. And it was the same thing. I went playing drums, but there were so many good drummers, but there weren't a lot of singers in my class, in that freshman class. And so I kept getting boosted up, like as a singer, as a drummer. In Cleveland, I was hitting. There was a small little circle of drummers in Cleveland. I was on it. It was like, oh, Myron's playing drums. Let him sit on drums. When I got to Boston, I was literally a little fish in a big pond, and nobody knew me as a drummer. I wasn't even close to some of the guys that were there. But singing-wise, it was a little different story, and I stood out. Somebody heard me singing from the drums and said, hey, I want you to be in my class. That was Walter Beasley, one of my mentors, who I'll be forever grateful for his tutelage. But I changed my major to singing, my vocal major. And from there, just kind of kept getting the awards, getting, not awards, but getting the opportunities to be in the different shows and some of the highlights that are usually reserved for the higher grades. Yeah. But I was getting it then. It was like, hey, this is our senior showcase.
Now you're getting fast-tracked.
Getting kind of fast-tracked. So I only stayed there for a year because I started getting afraid that I was going to lose what I had naturally if I kept going. It was kind of a weird thought process. But I'm like, I don't need to go to school for voice. I've been able to sing all my life. I'll go back home. Yeah. Went back home and just worked at a video store. And that's where I met, it was a video store, music store. But that's where I met Buddy Banks. And he was like, man, let's work together. So we went to his house, and there was a guy named Alex Cantrell there who became my writing partner. And he and I wrote a song called Sisters. Well, he wrote the song. I recorded a song called Sisters. And then he sent it to a manager who just happened to know the A&R from Island Records. This manager says, hey, they want to use your song Sisters on the Whoopi Goldberg movie, Eddie. I'm like, cool. I mean, cool. I didn't even know
You're like,
my friend
okay,
sent it.
cool.
I didn't even know he sent it.
There was no contracts or nothing yet. They
Not
just said
yet.
we want to use
They just
it, and
wanna
you was
use
like,
it.
cool.
Want to use it. So at the same time, they asked if I could write lyrics to a song that Aaron Hall had started to sing, but they didn't like the verses. I'm like, yeah. And so I ended up writing the lyrics to Tell Me, the verses.
Wow.
Sent that off, and they were like, yo, we love both of these, man. Both are going on the soundtrack. Can you come up and record this? Ended up recording that song for Drew Hill, and that became the entrance into the record deal. So a couple months after that, they were like, hey, man, we want to sign you. I'm like, well, what's that mean? We want you to be an artist. So literally, they just kind of took me out of the comfort world that I was in and fast-tracked me into that.
So you're getting fast-tracked again.
All of a sudden, I'm an artist, man. All of a sudden, they want me to do 10 songs on an album. I'm in the studio with all kinds of people, man. It was great. Really living like a young king.
Yeah. What was the most surprising part of that phase of your journey?
It's all surreal now to look back on it because it happened pretty quick.
Yeah.
The most surreal was that they offered me a record deal, and I wasn't shopping for one. It was just a guy who saw something in me.
Just walked right up to you.
Guy saw something in me and took it to the place, and they were like, yeah, this is what we want. And so I look back on the different stages of my life. So here I am. Today is what, the 10th of February, 6th of February?
Yeah.
And 2 days ago, my first feature film is being released. So
Yeah.
I've gone from recording albums, 3 personal albums, and then probably 20 features and probably 200 songs out there, to writing stage plays, to releasing a film. And all of it is just the natural course of where God has taken me.
Yeah.
I'm not striving for it. I'm not like, hey, I'm going to be the next. It's just, oh, I can do that. Let's try this. And God is just opening the door, man.
Yeah.
It's just amazing, man, to think of it. And so being signed to Island Records was really one of those blessings that just kind of came out of nowhere. I shouldn't say came out of nowhere, but it was just God opening the door. And I just walked into it.
So Island Records, we're talking about Island that merged with Def Jam.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
Yeah. It was a family, it was small. Hiram Hicks was the president at the time, and the other competing companies were like Kadar with Kadar Entertainment.
That was in the whole neo soul movement, right?
Yeah,
You're
so
talking
Def Jam
about
was out
Erykah
there.
Badu and all of them.
They were all there. So
Chico
that was
DeBarge.
Chico DeBarge was there. John B.
Yeah.
It was a lot of us. D'Angelo was right there. So that was kind of thing. And Joe was really big at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Joe and R. Kelly. I don't even know if I can say his name at this point.
I know, right?
but
Joe had a long run.
Yeah, he did, man. But at the time, R. Kelly was really hitting us hard with hits. And they were hoping to get an artist kind of like a mixture of Joe and R. Kelly. That's not really my style.
Yeah.
But again, I wasn't an artist to have my own style per se. I'm just a singer. So they say, hey, look, can you give us a Joe, R. Kelly? So my mind goes into, yeah, I think I can do that. I can listen to it. And that was probably the downfall, was trying to fit into a mold of something else as opposed to
Instead of manifesting who Myron Davis was. Yeah.
Because I could play piano, play drums, there was some talk about, hey, let's have you go on stage as a drummer, but do Phil Collins things. So they were trying to figure out how to help me become an artist.
Yeah.
So I would say that was probably some of the reason why just after a while it just didn't work.
Yeah.
The Lord really had a plan for me to be back doing this, because this is where I started.
How did you know? Because, I mean, I'm pretty sure there's a ton of people who are pursuing, they may never get that deal, but they're pursuing that world. How did you know when it was time that my calling is somewhere else?
Oh, man, for me it was kind of clear because things started to dry up. I could start to feel my cynicism every time I would have meetings, and it was like, hey, can you do something like this person?
Yeah.
Can you? And I could feel myself saying, man, that's not me, And I could just feel that the tension was there. And after a while, the record company wasn't able to sustain an artist who didn't know he was an artist.
Yeah.
you don't know where you're going in this R&B industry. So I had my moments where, you know, I was influenced by Prince. So I had some wild clothes on, man. I was down in Miami. One of my friends, still good friends today, man, he took pictures of me, man. I had on like those 6-inch Stacks shoes.
Are you serious?
Yeah, man. I was trying to do it. I was trying to, because my manager at the time was like, man, you got to turn yourself into an artist.
Oh.
So we were trying to do it. So I went out like Prince. Prince was an artist.
So instead of them seeing you as an artist already,
Yeah.
they wanted you to transform into something else.
Well, because the industry, you have to have an edge. I mean, we see
Yeah.
that to this day. When you look at the R&B artists and everybody out there, you see this weird hair and
Yeah.
the clothes that are just like, what? So those are the kind of things that, quote unquote, make you memorable. Anybody can sing.
Yeah.
Anybody, you know, can have a nice fade and haircut, but what if you color it blonde, you know what I'm saying,
Yeah.
and wear dragon tattoos, you know, that was kind of just how they push us. That was kind of what happened with Drew Hill. They tell their story that they started off as young kids,
Yeah.
and then the industry kind of shapes you, and every artist goes through it.
Yeah.
But because of my background, because of my faith, and I believe because of where the Lord wanted me, there was only so much that I was going to be able to get into.
I think so. You know, when I look at, and that's one of the reasons why I was really eager to interview you, because to me, I feel like you were just on loan
Yeah.
to that industry anyway.
Yeah, sure.
You know?
Yeah.
So it only made sense to me. Like, you got to enjoy a little bit
You
of
got
it.
to see it, yeah.
And it also was probably a little bit of training ground for you.
Absolutely. And I'll be honest, I mean, I still get royalty checks.
Yeah.
That's been a great part of the life, was writing songs, hearing them play, seeing videos, and then years later, the money's still coming in from it. So I
Yeah.
can't lie. I mean, that's great. And I think what it was is God knew me. He had a plan for me and understood that that was going to be a crucial part of my living as I got older, my inheritance.
Yeah.
So some of it was that, and some of it was I needed to be able to see it so that as a musician, as a worship leader, I could know what that pull was like.
Yeah.
What I always tell my friends, I remember the moment where it really changed for me. I was on stage. It was about 4,000 or 5,000 people in this auditorium. I believe it was Detroit. Detroit was one of the cities where I used to get so much love. I used to ride in from the airport, and on the radio they'd be like, "Hey, Myron's on such and such. If you out there, honk the horn." And people were like, "Oh," you know. And you could just, it was just so much love, man. I went in there and they treated me like a rock star, so to speak. But I was at this function, and I remembered singing the song Destiny and hearing what sounded like a roar of people just singing these lyrics. And I had my hands up, and I was soaking all of this glory in, man.
Yeah.
That's an unimaginable feeling to have all of these people just there singing your music, singing the song that you wrote in your basement. You know, when you ain't had nothing really to eat on, you just kind of, and then all of a sudden you are here and people are affirming
The
your
full
gift.
fruition of that gift.
And I could feel the glory so heavy that it kind of almost, you know, kind of overwhelmed me.
Yeah.
But it made me think of the scripture that talks about Lucifer directing this praise up to the Lord, directing worship and saying, "I will be like the Most High." He was in charge of that flowing glory, and instead of him wanting to, he just had to stop here. And that was one moment where the glory was just stopping with me. If I had kept going, I would have been strung out because when you're not getting that, you're trying to figure out how to keep the high going.
Whew.
When you come back home and people just know you as Myron and they don't know you as Myron Destiny, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like, well, how do I keep that high going? And that's why I feel like a lot of artists get addicted to pleasure to try to keep the high going. The Lord spared me from it, man.
And I think it speaks a lot to your upbringing and foundation.
Yeah.
That in that moment, you had a scripture to reach out to that really impacted you. You know, a lot of people in that moment would have probably felt something, but had nothing to latch on to.
That's real. There was a plan, man. There was a plan for me that was bigger than that moment. But I never forgot that moment.
Yeah.
I never forget it. I can still feel what it's like. And so I pray constantly that the Lord would just kind of keep me grounded so that I don't get so what it is it's a weird feeling. Every now and then there will be an itch or a longing for the glory.
Yeah.
There's just an itch of longing. And it's in my back of my mind, it's like, hey, you got this talent. you could get that glory if you want. You can go back and get it just for a moment, And it's the strangest thing, but that's my prayers that God just keeps me grounded, and He's been doing it.
But you know what? The way that you were impacting people, you still impact us. It's just in a way that you're not absorbing that glory now. Because I got to say, for a worship leader or just a minister, you are probably one of the most transparent on stage that I've seen, because you are willing to live it out right in the moment and talk about the things you're going through and let people relate to it.
Oh, that's what's up.
And I think that's, for a worship leader, that's the best. And you kind of actually teach us that as you're up there. You explain to us what real worship is, and that it's not just music. And so I think you do a good job, an excellent job of living it when you hop on that stage.
Oh, man, praise God.
I've
understood from my experience in R&B, I've understood that for the most part, the whole worship leader platform, I think most times it's taken out of context. Like biblically, there's no one person who stands up and does all of his vocal tricks and gets anybody in. The idea is really just to give people the truth about God, and then you lead everybody in corporate worship. We're all singing the same thing, not me trying to stand out and become a star. And that's where the gospel music industry has mirrored secular industry, where they're making idols, they're making stars,
Big time.
So that was another question, like, hey, man, why don't you do a gospel album, do a gospel CD? And I'm praying through it. I do love music, but I'm not trying to be a star, man. I'm not trying to, so that's just kind of one of the things I keep coming back to. So when I'm standing on the stage here at church, my goal really is to let people know that I love and revere the Lord, and our call as human beings who've been redeemed is to give him praise, give him the praise, not a person, not a personality, not even a pastor, not a deacon or elder. We give our praise to God.
Yeah. I think even in that, you give the worship and the sacrifice to God, which includes your gift.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And I think you've modeled that. Pastor Kevin James has modeled that.
Absolutely.
And so for me to see that, it helped me to say, I'm going to do that as well, right? You take your gift and you give it to God.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And if he wants you to have it back,
that's right.
He'll let you know
that's right.
it's time to use it.
That's right.
Right? So I love the fact that you do that, man. But let's talk about, we've talked about you growing up, man. You even entering into the music industry and how you made it through that. And I just want to real quickly shout out your parents, because I think that's why you were able to make through it that way.
Absolutely.
Because not everybody has that story to tell.
Absolutely.
So I think, and I know I've never met your father, but the way that you talk about him being grounded in the word, but I have met your mother.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact that's where a lot of that grounding came
absolutely,
from.
Absolutely. My father planted the seed. He set the stage. And once he left the house, like I said, around 10 or 11, my mother kept it going. And, man, her vision is so great. I'm working on a book about this, I think. But
y'all heard it here first, y'all.
what she would do is she would, after a while, we started hearing this T.D. Jakes. We started hearing this real gruff voice all hours of the night, early in the morning, late at night before we went to bed, just this, how T.D. Jakes, real rough talk.
Yeah.
And we weren't into that stuff. We were, 12, 13, 14, probably all through high school until I graduated. And she was always playing this, and she would get these big boxes of videos, Manpower, and all this stuff, and just had them. She would play them in the background. My friends were over. I could hear T.D. Jakes. I'm like, Mom, turn that off. It's so loud. And once I got to college, was having my first year. It was pretty rough. My father passed. And I was just kind of not feeling great. So I said, Mom, can you send me one of those Manpower tapes? So she sent me a whole box of T.D. Jakes videos. So as I got older, it was right before I got married. I said, Mom, what was the deal with this T.D. Jakes? Why did you get into him so much? I mean, what? And she said, I really love his teaching. She said, but the way I found him is I knew that I had two young boys that I wanted to raise the right way, and I didn't want to have another man in the house. So I figured I'm going to find a preacher with the roughest, manliest voice I could find and play that.
Wow.
And so that became the voice that we heard growing up in, man. That was so intentional, man. It still brings chills. She knew the purpose that God had called us to.
Yeah.
And so she knew this is her assignment. She never got married. She never saw her date anybody, but T.D. Jakes became that godly man's voice that we grew up with.
I like the fact that she thought about it so thoroughly.
Yeah, man.
Like even the biophysical effect of, we respond differently to a deep male
Yeah, that's
voice.
right, man. That's right.
And just hearing one in your house can make a difference.
That's right.
Man, that's
It's
powerful,
deep, man.
man.
It's so good, man. It's so good. And it has shaped how I am a father to my children as well.
Yeah.
And it just, the way it affects me the most is instead of being angry, angry and being petty, sometimes we can be a little petty, just stuff that goes on. I try to be as direct as I can and very forward and even forceful when I have to, but just direct so that my kids know, okay, when mommy speaks, it's mommy speaking. But when daddy speaks,
it's clear.
It's so clear and there's a difference, man. So that is one of the things that I gleaned along with just a love for the word, man, because T.D. Jakes back in the day, man, there was nobody who could break down a scripture like
seriously.
He brought passages to life. So for a young person, man, I saw the scripture that I knew in a completely different light.
Man, that's really, and I love the point you make about a man's word, right? And I tell this to the young guys I mentor now. When a man speaks, there should be no questions. You got to be clear. If people walk away confused, then you haven't done your job correctly.
It's good.
The onus is on us to constantly mature and learn how to give a clear message. No passive aggressiveness.
That's right. That's real. And we can do that. We can do that. We can retreat to a man cave and hold stuff over our wives or even our kids. But that's learning how to really be a man and standing up. And sadly, there aren't a lot of examples, which is why some of the young guys in the generation right after mine struggled a lot. But what I'm excited about is to see this generation. Fathers are there, man. I look around the community. I look around what's going on. Even Kobe, who just recently passed, man, just seeing him, seeing LeBron, seeing these celebrities with their kids. It's like a different generation. Like we're excited to do what our fathers didn't necessarily do for us.
Yeah.
To be there for our kids, man. So this is a great generation, I feel.
I'm glad you said that, man, because not many people shine light on that.
Oh, yeah, man.
That's
it's
really
real,
good.
Man. This is good stuff. It's a blessing.
Yeah. And speaking of that, man, let's talk about Myron, the husband and father, man. How was that transition into marriage?
Oh, man. So,
because, you got signed to a record deal, man.
Yeah. So like I told you, man, I was never an artist in my own mind. I'm not an artist in my own mind. So the signing to the record deal was just a great opportunity and experience.
Yeah.
After it was gone, it was gone.
Yeah.
I did miss the expensive dinners every evening and the flying here and there, man. I got to do a lot of stuff. One of the things that humbled me, though, is I had a son when I was just at the end of my record deal. Wasn't married. I met a young lady in England and fell in love. Thought this was the person I was going to marry. And her and I had a boy together. And she wasn't interested in staying in the States. And at the time, I wasn't focused enough to say that I could move to England. So we separated.
Yeah.
And not having my son was another thing that really humbled me and made me think, man, what am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
Am I so invested in my artistry and living here in New York? And I love New York. Oh, man. I didn't think I'd ever leave there. But that was a part of the awakening. I had to really walk away from all of the trimmings that came with that lifestyle. And I moved back here and started coming to new community. And that's where the Lord started really getting my focus back together. So, so I went through my nicks and bruises before I met my wife. But met my wife here at church. And, man, it was
a church love story.
It was a church love story, man. It was a church love story. And kind of a crazy one. I don't even have time to go into how it started. but just to say that 15 years later, my wife and I have been through the ups and downs. Man, we've been through some rough times, separated for a while, didn't think it was going to last after, 11 years or so, after 12 years, thinking, oh, this is it.
Yeah.
We're not compatible. We're not made for each other, Going through that to really kind of coming back into an understanding of the commitment of marriage, which is very similar. In fact, it mirrors a commitment to Christ. Mm-hmm. We're called as disciples of Christ to deny ourselves, take up our cross, which has to do with suffering, take up our cross daily and follow him. And it's the same calling in marriage. And we don't talk about that a whole lot because it's just too painful to talk about. I'd rather have in my mind a loophole so that when it gets rough, when we decide we don't like each other,
how do I get out of this?
How we can get out. But man, it was amazing because we were really close to divorce. And there was a preacher who came back on. His name is David Pawson. He came back on the air real late at night, and his message was God hates divorce. That whole finding a reason to divorce your wife, that's just an excuse. That's not what God wants. That's not his perfect will. And he was just saying it cold, blunt. Everybody always says, well, you can get out if there's infidelity or if you abuse or blah, blah, blah. But the reality is that God calls men to suffer for their wives the way that he suffered for his bride. Excuse me. He describes the church. He describes the people of Israel in the Old Testament as an adulterous wife. They always went after other idols. They always turned their back on God, and he would always take them back, up until the point where he said, you know what? Because of your constant sin, you're not going to be able to offer the sacrifice that's suitable. I'm going to be the sacrifice. Yeah. And that's what a husband is supposed to do, is cover your wife. So where we're thinking, oh, she don't treat me, she don't respect me, she don't do this, she don't look, she don't do all these excuses that we make as men. What we're called to as Christian men is to die to ourselves and get on the cross for our wives, so to speak. So we've been through it, man. So I can say right now, God has restored and kept and renewed my wife and I in our marriage, going on 16 years this year. We've got
big up Camille. Shout out.
Oh yeah, wife is the one. And then we've got 4 kids and 2 grandchildren at this point, man. So it's wild, man. I'm becoming one of the mentors. You know, I didn't see it coming. Kind of happened pretty slowly, in my opinion, but it's moving quick here as the days go by.
Listen, I gotta give you. I know you touched on a little bit of your story and your struggle, and you're making it through the struggle. Yeah. I gotta give y'all a lot of credit for one being open about it, right? Because it's one of the things that a lot of us struggle with. Sure. You know, we go through something, we want to hide that from everybody. We'll wait until it's all good again, then we'll come around everybody, you know. But y'all stood up in front of everybody and let us see what it looks like to make it through. And that's what, like we talked about earlier, where are the models, the examples?
Well, I'll tell you what's interesting about that, though, is because I was already up front, the transparency was, I'll put it this way, it was necessary. Had I been, somebody just not up front, you may not have ever heard this story. Yeah. And that's another, I'll say that's another design of God's will. Is he's given me responsibility with my voice, with my family, with my position here at the church. And with that responsibility, or I'll say with that opportunity comes a greater responsibility. And that's to be transparent, to be very intentional, to be living for the Lord, because people see it. That's another thing that I think is an interesting thing about fame. So many people want to be famous, but they don't realize once you become famous and known, your mistakes are known too. Yeah. You're not just known for your good stuff. Think about Kobe, man. The tragedy of just the tragedy of what he had to live through with his legacy. Michael Jordan, the same way. All these people have stuff that if you were just a guy who nobody knew your name, like if you were just Kobe Thompson instead of Kobe Bryant, nobody knows what Kobe Thompson did.
It's true.
Just lives his life out peacefully. But with that opportunity comes a big responsibility. Yeah. And so, like I said, man, God was faithful to my wife and I, that after everything we went through, all of the hurt feelings and disappointment, that he was able to restore us. Yeah. And we were good.
Man, I see a common thread in a lot of the things you're saying, that God shined his light on you in a unique way earlier in your life to give you a foundation. It's not like you didn't get rocked like everybody else, but having that foundation allows you, it's not like it makes you better than other people, but it gives you this way that even when you go through what other people are going through, you can let a little God show
Yeah.
to help other people out,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because now you transitioned into movie director, cinematographer,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yes,
So
sir.
we in that area. And it's a really quick story, man. You casted me in my first role,
Yes,
right?
sir.
In a movie, in a music video.
Yeah.
And I remember right afterwards, you text me and you said, hey, there's an audition
Yeah,
coming up
that's right.
for a TV show. And you were like, hey, all you need is an acting resume
Yeah.
and some a script to read.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and you're like, a headshot. And I'm looking at the text like, I don't got any of that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm not going. And then like 2 minutes later, the Holy Spirit like tapped me on the shoulder and was like, Myron already knows you don't have that.
Yeah.
And he still sent you the text.
Yeah, that's it.
This is a challenge.
Good stuff,
Are you going to obey or not?
Oh, man, good
And I
stuff.
went ahead and did it, and I got that role. So I just want to say, like, man, through your obedience and your way to move with that foundation, you affect people in a way you probably may not even realize.
No, not usually.
Yeah.
Praise God, though. That's
You
good
know?
stuff, man. Yeah, man. And congrats, because you got a film coming out. Is it
Yes.
out yet?
It's coming out June 20th.
Oh, man,
It'll be out
good
June
stuff,
20th.
man.
Thank you so much.
I think it's incredible, man. God has really, he's given us gifts. He's given us, and what the gifts are, I was telling my wife this all the time, whether your gift is being able to crunch numbers, remember dates, whether it's being able to paint the Mona Lisa on a piece of canvas or a notebook paper, or whether it's to sing or rap, or whether it's just something as simple as you keep your hair nice so that people say, man, your hair always looks great.
Yeah.
All of those are just opportunities to give God glory, not just to say, hey, thank you, I appreciate that. But it's an opportunity to say, man, let me tell you about the Creator who gave me this hair. That's really what our purpose is.
Yeah.
People spend their whole lives looking for purpose in career, and only to find out at the end of a career, if you don't have the Lord, nothing lasts. It doesn't last. Only what we do for Christ will last. So every gift that we have is an opportunity, not just to say thank you and to smile, but to say, let me tell you about God. Let me tell you about the Creator, because at the end of life, all of us stand before the Creator. All of us stand before God, and we have to give an account. And so when we stand before Him, we don't have the opportunity to say, well, you know what? I was going to go to church more, but this pastor really mistreated my uncle or mistreated me. Or I was going to go to church, but I didn't like the way they sang, or I didn't like the way they did this. Or I was going to, go to church, but I don't believe that. I believe that the white man did this. Or, so, just we come up with these excuses. But when we stand before the Lord, none of that matters.
Yeah.
It's what did you do with Jesus? That's the one thing that matters. So the importance, the urgency of us who have gifts and who have platforms, the urgency for us to tell those people around us about Jesus is so high.
Yeah.
Because none of us know how long we're going to live. We might think we have 100 years left, like Michael Douglas just had 103 years, or 41 years, or 40 years, or 30 years, or 10 years, or 2 years. We don't know what the scope is, but to be prepared by using our gifts every moment, every opportunity we get to stand before kings, to shout out, hey, let me tell you about my Creator and His plan for you. And let me tell you about sin. Let me tell you about the answer to sin. Let me tell you about the benefits of trusting in Jesus. You got to be able to tie that stuff back in. And so with my film, One Last Prayer, that was my goal. It's like, man, I wonder if I could do a movie that has a gospel in it, and I wonder what happened. So I believe that all of that, because I was intentional about writing the gospel in the film, I believe that's one of the reasons why it's available, because it was my first one. It's not the greatest film ever, but it was it was my first project, and I was so intentional about sharing the gospel in it. And the Lord was like, all right, I'm going to go ahead and take this. I'm going to take this little offering and do something with it.
I love it, man. So One Last Prayer, man. It stars your brother, right?
My brother's in it, man.
Whew.
My brother's in it. So we kind of made a joke, man. My brother's been in the acting business for 20 or so years, man. And I used to always tell him, I said, man, we should make our own film. Don't go to LA, don't go to Hollywood, man. And we would kind of joke about it. But at the end of the day, after 20 or so years, my brother's first film is my first film that we filmed right here in my mom's house, in my mother's house.
So wait a minute, you started filming movies back then?
I'm talking about 2014.
Wow. Wow.
I'm talking about 2014. That was our first
Man.
feature film that's out on Vudu and out on DirecTV. It'll be out on Amazon. One Last Prayer was our first feature film
I
together.
love it, man.
Yeah.
So what's next
Yeah.
for Myron, man?
That's a good question. I'll be leading worship at the Moody Men's Conference, Walk Worthy Conference at
I'll
the end
be
of
there.
February. After that, man, I want to just keep writing. I want to write. I've got other scripts in mind for film. I love making film. I love making music, so I'm writing some music as well. But my goal is to write a book. But my real ambition is to train my kids up to love the Lord and to be able to carry on. Both of them have gifts. So my real ambition is to train them up to love the Lord and be able to use their gifts to tell other people about Jesus.
I love it, man. And you know what? That's exactly what your parents were able to do for you.
That's right.
So I love that continuation of the cycle,
That's
man.
right, man. That's right.
That is lovely, man.
That's what's up, bro.
Man.
That's what's up, man.
Listen, I really thank you for joining me, man. Listen, if you want to, is there anything you want to leave the listeners with, man?
Yeah. Man, you know, I love your message. I love your theme, man.
Thank you.
And what I always take from it is that we have choices. We have choices that we make every day, and those choices help shape the structure of our future and our kids' future.
Yeah.
So make the most of every choice. Make the most of every choice. There's a scripture that says, "Help us to number our days," and it basically means to realize that life is short. And that each moment, each choice that we make is laying a foundation. So choose wisely, walk wisely. You know what I mean?
I love it, man.
Days are short, but there's opportunity. So today, if you're listening to this, you have an opportunity right now to get up, do something creative, do something productive, constructive. Read a book, read something to your children. Go help somebody. Do something constructive that adds to the kingdom. Keep pushing.
I love it. That's a way to form a godly legacy, man. And y'all heard it right here, man. We always say, where's the instruction? Where are the male voices? Here it is right here. So again, I thank you, man. I thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Heights fam doing it, representing,
Heights,
man. Exactly. So thank you, everybody, for listening, man. This has been me again, J. Floyd Speaks Life, interviewing the minister Myron Davis. Check for him down at the Moody Bible Conference, the Walk Worthy Conference, man. I like to go all the time, so I'm definitely going. I even have a special where I offer my life coaching clients. If they go, they get a free month. They don't got to pay me nothing for that month. Just go. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of growth that can happen there. All right, so definitely check for us. Thank you for listening, and check for me again on our next episode. I love y'all. I love y'all. I love y'all. Peace.